Well, the breaking news at this hour is that Rush Limbaugh, an iconic figure in the conservative movement and the creator, really, of an alternative media altogether, he has passed away of lung cancer at the age of 70. According to Ryan Saavedra, writing for The Daily Wire, conservative radio icon Rush Limbaugh passed away on Wednesday morning at 70 years old following his year-long battle with lung cancer. We, the Limbaugh family, are deeply saddened to announce that our beloved Rush has died, Limbaugh's wife, Catherine Adams Limbaugh, said in a post on her husband's Facebook account. Rush Hudson Limbaugh III will forever be the greatest of all time, a courageous, brilliant, gentle giant, and radio pioneer. Our entire family is so thankful to everyone who prayed and cared for Rush, especially the audience he adored. Rush's love for our country and for all of you will live on eternally. Rush, of course, had been expecting something very much like this over the past few months. He said in his final radio broadcast of 2020, "I wasn't expected to be alive today. I wasn't expected to make it to October and then to November and then to December. Yet here I am today, got some problems, feeling pretty good." President Trump awarded Rush the Presidential Medal of Freedom at the 2020 State of the Union following Limbaugh's revealing to the world that he had been diagnosed with cancer. At the time, President Trump said, "Almost every American family knows the pain when a loved one is diagnosed with a serious illness. Here tonight is a special man beloved by millions of Americans who just received a stage 4 advanced cancer diagnosis. This is not good news. But what is good news is that he is the greatest fighter and winner you will ever meet. Rush Limbaugh, thank you for your decades of tireless devotion to our country." Producer James Goldman, who's known as Bo Snerdley on air, he wrote on Twitter last week, "Our prayers are with Rush as he continues to fight the illness he has been afflicted with. We are still praying for a remission." Back in December, obviously, Limbaugh opened up about the cancer diagnosis, saying that people should take time to be thankful for life because everybody has an expiration date. Rush is a seminal figure in the history of American conservatism, the most prominent conservative in America following William F. Buckley. The fact is that Rush shaped millions of us. I grew up listening to Rush. So did virtually every conservative of my age group. I remember riding to college in my 1986 Honda Civic with no air conditioning, listening to Rush on the way there. I remember being in the car with my dad and turning on Rush Limbaugh and listening to what Rush had to say on the day's event. Rush almost literally created the entire alternative media infrastructure by creating talk radio. The Rush Limbaugh Show debuted on August 1st, 1988 on a handful of AM radio stations across the country, according to Fox News. In the more than 30 years since, there have been many memorable moments and a few long-running gags that helped make the show and its host popular among a wide swath of the population. Rush obviously was famous for saying that he had talent on loan from God. Now the talent has been returned to his creator. Rush was very tongue-in-cheek. His show was insightful and funny. The left hated it because the left hates all conservatives who have any level of prominence. They are spending today celebrating. You can tell the disgustingness of the left today by how they are reacting to Rush Limbaugh's death, not with any level of class, not even with any level of remove. Instead, they're just jumping right in, ecstatic about the fact that a man died at the age of 70 of lung cancer because they disagreed with Rush Limbaugh politically. Now, I didn't know Rush particularly well. I met Rush on a couple of occasions. When I met him, he was unfailingly polite. I would say shockingly almost shy. In private, Rush Limbaugh was a private guy. He was not somebody who was boisterous and loud. He was unflinchingly generous to pretty much everybody who knew him well. I'm close with David Limbaugh, Rush's brother. David is a credit to his family. Rush obviously was as well. Rush gave so many members of the movement their start in radio and in politics, from Mark Levin to Sean Hannity to Michael Medved to Erickson. Rush was an incredibly generous figure on a personal level. And again, his ability to take complex conservative ideas and distill them down to their essence and then inject them into the body politic with a large dose of humor is responsible for the rise of the Republican Party over the post-Reagan era. There's a reason that in 1994, when Republicans won back Congress for the first time in decades, Rush was made an honorary member of Congress. Rush's view on politics obviously shaped the direction of the Republican Party, sometimes in ways I disagreed with, but his overall conservative viewpoint never abated. Rush was willing to fight the left. He was constantly willing to fight the left with good humor. And so many of us really owe the fact that there is an alternative media to Rush Limbaugh. Without the rise of AM talk radio, there would be no Fox News. Without Fox News, there would be no internet media. There'd be no alternative media. There would be no Daily Wire. There'd be no Ben Shapiro show. All of us in the conservative media owe the existence of an alternative media to the outsized personality and outsized talent of Rush Limbaugh, for sure. Erickson, who is friends with him, has quite a beautiful piece on him today. He writes, "A few weeks or so after Thanksgiving, I was sitting on my front porch with two friends. We were sharing some bourbon and cigars. My phone lit up with a message from Rush. He and my wife have variants of the same type of lung cancer, though hers was caught very early, and her treatment has thus far contained it. But Rush knew she had an older iPhone with a Touch ID, and he'd been chiding me to upgrade her. He didn't quite understand my wife's resistance to technology, and insisted I was neglecting my wife by failing to give her a state-of-the-art phone. Undeterred, he now wanted me to know he was sending her a new iPhone 12 Pro Max because he was convinced, if it hadn't already, her chemo was going to screw up her fingerprints and make unlocking her phone difficult. It already had been. My wife now has a better iPhone than I do, thanks to Rush. This is the sort of guy Rush was, says Eric Erickson. In the midst of his own far more serious battle with cancer, he was insistent my wife have a better phone. I was not alone in benefiting from his generosity. He was generous with advice and with iPhones, and God help you if you offered to buy lunch at a restaurant. You'd inevitably wind up aggrieving the waitstaff who knew Rush was the best tipper in the restaurant. The Erickson household has several generations of iPhones that showed up thanks to Rush. We at one point would race each other to buy the phone and then email to claim victory. Then he started letting other people order for him, and it wasn't a fair fight anymore. Sometimes, even as we disagreed on politics, we would have lengthy email chains about articles from Ars Technica or what Apple was doing. Eric Erickson writes, back in 2010, as Herman Cain ran for president, Cox Media Group offered me Herman Cain's job. I was running Red State and also on CNN constantly. I really didn't think I wanted to take on 3 hours of daily radio. I had zero experience, wasn't sure about it at the time. Rush, ironically, had been the one to talk me into going to CNN instead of Fox. Sean Hannity got me a meeting at Fox, but Rush said I needed to beef up my missionary skills, and going to CNN, where everyone would be trying to kill me, would help me, and besides, even CNN viewers needed to hear the truth. I did it, and now a few years later, Rush insisted he'd never talk to me again if I didn't get on the radio, and so I did. A few years later, he was telling Roger Ailes he should steal me from CNN for Fox. A decade later, I'm now doing 5 hours of radio a day. Much of my career I owe to Rush and his guidance. The fact is that, as Erickson says, Rush was a quiet soul. He loved football games and golf. Erickson says, when I was a teenager making the obligatory visits to college with my dad, we stumbled on Rush's program while driving through Alabama. My dad was searching for Paul Harvey. We developed a shared affection for Rush, and even when we couldn't talk about other things, we could talk about things Rush had said on air. I'd stay up late at night and watch Rush's TV show, which Roger Ailes produced. The day my parents finally stopped suggesting I should probably hold on to my law license was the day I filled in for Rush for the first time. Here's the reality. So many of us were shaped by Rush. My father is fond of saying that when the history of the 20th century is written, Rush Limbaugh's name will be a prominent name featured. Because without Rush, there is no modern conservative movement. As I have said, there is no alternative media. All of us in alternative media owe an enormous debt of gratitude to Rush. And it is worth noting that the way that the left is responding upon his death is perfectly predictable and perfectly disgusting. The left is celebrating Rush Limbaugh's death today, which is something that I'm sure Rush would have taken with his typical good humor, and also would have fully expected, given the amount of hatred he received simply for receiving a Presidential Medal of Honor at the State of the Union address. If you look at some of the tweets that are emanating from mainstream sources, they are astonishing. One Scott Shapiro, a professor at Yale Law School, writes today, I wouldn't say I was happy that Rush Limbaugh died. It's more like euphoria. Twitter trended Rush Limbaugh, along with the tags good riddance and rot in hell. Rest in peace. Rest in peace was replaced on Twitter with rest in piss. I kid you not. This is the left, the censorious authoritarian left that hates anybody who dissents. Unless you believe this was just about Rush Limbaugh, it's not. If any prominent conservative were to die without having embraced Democratic agenda items, that person would be treated exactly the same as Rush, and Rush knew it. While the right owes much of its modern creation to Rush, so does the modern left, which decided that in response to the rise of Rush, they would create an entire censorious culture dedicated to taking people off the air, ruining their lives, and destroying their careers. Media Matters would not exist without Rush. All the folks on the left who spend their days at the New York Times editorial meetings deciding who to cancel, they would not exist without Rush, because Rush awakened in the left a recognition that if the right was actually heard, and that if the arguments of conservatives were actually heard, they might win. And this scared the living hell out of them. It scared the absolute living hell out of them. The tweets that we are seeing today are frankly disgusting. And naturally, all the people who are issuing these tweets think that they are the virtuous. Over at Deadspin, a left-wing news outlet, they headline, quote, Rush Limbaugh, dead at 70, spewed racist filth from every pulpit, including ESPN's. They tweeted, noted fearmonger Rush Limbaugh died Wednesday. He was 70 and an a-hole. Wajahat Ali of CNN writes for the Washington Post sometimes. He wrote, if Rush Limbaugh spoke about white people and conservatives the way he did about the rest of us, his death would be viewed as the end of an extremist who inspired and promoted intolerance and hate across a large part of the country. Instead, he's a GOP hero tells you everything. Charlotte Clymer, who also works for a wide variety of progressive groups and writes for mainstream media all the time, writes, Rush Limbaugh was a coward and white supremacist. He was in service to his own greed, prejudice, and hypocrisy, and that is how history will remember him. And this is the best the left has to offer. This is what the left believes. The left fully believes that they are so morally superior that the death of somebody who disagrees is worth celebrating. Dancing on graves is what they do. This is all connected to a deeper belief on the left that everybody who disagrees ought to be censored, because after all, if those people get to speak, they might end up like Rush Limbaugh. Remember that the push right now to suggest that all right-wing views are, in essence, incitement, that didn't start now. That started with Rush Limbaugh, when the left decided that Rush was responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing because he was conservative. That was just the latest iteration. And now we see the outgrowth of the pernicious authoritarian leftism as it takes over the auspices of many of our major institutions. Well, if Rush Limbaugh's life is to mean anything, it should be meaningful for all the people he inspired. It should also remind us that when you fight back, you can win. Because Rush started with nothing. Rush started as a scout in the Kansas City Royals organization. He started on local AM talk radio. He became one of the wealthier men in America and a person millions of people listen to every single day. The possibilities in America are endless. They will remain endless so long as we take in serious consideration Rush's view about free markets and free individuals. And we should also remember that the people who oppose Rush, they generally oppose you. They would feel the same way about anybody on the right who is prominent dying today as they feel about Rush Limbaugh. They would celebrate. They're not going to pretend that Rush Limbaugh is a fellow American. To them, Rush is an enemy. So long as they believe that, there will not be unity. There will not be unity. The sort of sad nature of the polarization of the American public did not start with Rush. The left tries to say it's Rush. It is not. It is that any time the leftist monopoly is broken, that person must be castigated and destroyed. And so what you're going to see today from the mainstream media is them taking all of the things that Rush said that were worst and taking them out of context and blowing them out of proportion and saying this represents Rush Limbaugh. You can do this with literally any human being on planet Earth. We all live lives in which we say many words and many things we regret. The reality is, the lasting memory of Rush is going to be of a gentleman and a person who laughed with us and at politics, and a person who tried to share values of individualism with millions and millions of Americans. And that's a hell of a legacy. It really is. The creation of the alternative media, it would not exist without Rush Limbaugh. The woke left's attempts to shut down debate didn't start today. It started yesterday. And their hatred for Rush is hatred for you. And we should keep that in mind as we move forward into this supposed era of new unity. Because there can't be unity until people on the left realize that Rush Limbaugh wasn't their enemy, he was just their political opponent. There is a difference.